Today, we're diving into a series of tweets and retweets from investigative journalist Whitney Webb. She exposes the deep and dangerous links between Epstein, Thiel, Trump, the global financial cabal, crypto, and the real power running the world. Let's start with Whitney Webb sharing a post about Epstein's ties to cryptocurrency. Anybody shocked about all the Bitcoin talk in these Epstein emails didn't read the chain.wiki. By reposting Mark Goodwin, Webb underscores that Epstein's involvement in Bitcoin and crypto was already documented, and those surprised by recent revelations haven't been following the research. Next, Whitney Webb highlights the connections between billionaire Joe Lewis, global finance cabals, and high-level political pardons. Trump just pardoned the Soros pal who broke the Bank of England with Soros and current Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. For a financial crime he pled guilty to. Lewis is part of what the NYT once called a currency trading and manipulating cabal that also included Jimmy Goldsmith, arguably Epstein's first major contact in the world of elite finance back in the early 1970s. Epstein was arguably part of this cabal after the NYT wrote them in the mid-1990s, given the multiple attestations to his abilities in currency stabilization and the reverse and currency trading in general. I first wrote about Lewis years ago, 2019, because he has created his own de facto state in El Bolsón, Argentina, where he has bought out the local government and has his staff regularly threaten to kill, and has nearly succeeded, locals if they try and access the public lake his mansion borders. However, according to sources I spoke with when I traveled there to report about it for Mint Press, he allows IDF soldiers on vacation in South America to access the lake and his property. They brag about it in local hostels. He also owns an airstrip that the Argentine government oddly has no oversight of what comes in or out, and locals who suggested planes were using it to make suspect trips to the Falkland Islands ended up having their living room shot up. In addition, he is a close business associate of Marcelo Mindlin, who, along with Eduardo Elstein, are the men Soros handpicked to run his Argentine interests until they parted ways a few years ago. Mindlin and Lewis jointly control most of Argentina's power grid, and Elstein is one of the biggest forces in real estate and banking, as well as the host of the Lau Lau Forum, where Argentine business elites meet behind closed doors, like a South American WEF. Elstein and Mindlin are interestingly big Javier Milei backers. Maybe something to think about given that a longtime Soros associate, now running the Treasury Department, wants to use billions in taxpayer funds to keep him afloat. It's not America first, it's criminal banker syndicate first. In this post, Webb connects the recent pardon of Joe Lewis to historic financial manipulation involving figures like Soros, Epstein, and Goldsmith. She alleges Lewis operates with impunity in Argentina, describes his links to powerful business elites, and suggests that U.S. policy favors a criminal banker syndicate over ordinary Americans. Webb's point is to expose the global reach and protection of elite financial criminals. Whitney Webb continues her investigation into the elite currency trading cabal and hints at their deeper connections and true allegiances. On the aforementioned currency trading cabal, who do they work for? Who was Goldsmith a cousin to, and who capitalized Soros's first fund? That's your answer. Webb is urging readers to look deeper into the background of the currency trading cabal. She's suggesting that the true power behind figures like Goldsmith and Soros is revealed by their family ties and financial backers. Webb implies that by answering these questions, the real architects and beneficiaries of global financial schemes can be identified. Whitney Webb reposted Decensored News, November 13th. Here's a short primer on J.D. Vance's connections to Epstein associate Peter Thiel, which Whitney Webb was way ahead of the curve on. This repost highlights Webb's early reporting on the connections between J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel, an associate of Jeffrey Epstein. Whitney Webb underscores that she faced backlash for raising concerns about Thiel's influence and Vance's ties to him, but recent developments are now validating her warnings. The post also points to the broader issue of how powerful networks shape political careers and narratives, often in ways critics initially dismiss. Whitney Webb shares her perspective on the true nature of Jeffrey Epstein's activities and the broader implications for society and technology. My feeling is that now it is safe to release the info that Epstein was really a sex trafficker as a side gig and was mainly an intelligence asset of Israel and the U.S., a big-time financial criminal on behalf of transnational capital. I would argue transnational organized crime disguised as transnational capital, and an arms trader because the people he was helping have stolen so much of America's wealth and have taken control over so much of the government. That is why even admitting the true breadth of the scandal and operation doesn't even seem to move the needle. Criminals are in charge, and they run both parties. They have created the infrastructure for neo-feudalism, enforced by technology, and are herding us into the corral opt-out of AI, digital ID, and the surveillance state that Epstein associates built now, because we still can. Webb is asserting that Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking was only a small part of his real role, which she claims involved working as an intelligence asset for both Israel and the US, as well as facilitating financial crimes and arms deals for powerful elites. She argues that these networks have captured much of America's wealth and government, and that even public exposure of these crimes fails to bring change, because the same criminal interests control both major political parties. Webb urges viewers to resist the growing surveillance state, especially technologies linked to Epstein's associates, while there is still time. In this next X post, Whitney Webb addresses her critics and calls out those who dismissed her warnings about Peter Thiel's influence in American politics and his connections to figures like J.D. Vance and Jeffrey Epstein. Also, all of the people who smeared me this and last year for pointing out J.D. Vance's Peter Thiel connections and why Thiel is bad, and also shaming me for not trusting in Trump should be eating their shirts right now after these recent releases. You sold the American people Epstein associates as political saviors, and you should apologize. Here, Whitney Webb is responding to those who criticized her for exposing the links between J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, and Jeffrey Epstein. She argues that recent revelations have vindicated her reporting, and she calls on her critics to apologize for promoting individuals with questionable associations as political heroes. Webb's post highlights the importance of scrutinizing powerful networks and not blindly trusting political figures endorsed by controversial elites. In this post, Whitney Webb analyzes the controversial appointment of Jay Clayton and its connections to the Epstein case and Trump administration. The Clayton appointment is so unreal. Jeffrey Berman was pressured to step down by the first Trump admin roughly a year after prosecuting Epstein in 2019. As I recall, it was around the time when Berman was targeting Steve Bannon. Bill Barr tried to have Clayton replace him in 2020, but was unsuccessful. Clayton spent the time waiting to be ushered into that position by Trump earlier this year at Epstein associate Leon Black's Apollo Global, in a board position they seemingly made just for him. In other words, Clayton is the guy the first Trump administration and Bill Barr specifically wanted in to replace the people who had Epstein, and later Maxwell, arrested, and when they couldn't do it, a super-rich Epstein associate gave him tons of money, and now he has been installed in that position to investigate Epstein. How stupid do they think people are? Whitney Webb is highlighting what she sees as a revolving door between the Trump administration, powerful financial interests, and the Epstein case. She points out that Jay Clayton, who was previously blocked from replacing a prosecutor who went after Epstein, was later given a lucrative board position by Leon Black, an Epstein associate. Before being appointed to investigate Epstein-related matters, Webb suggests this is a blatant conflict of interest and questions the integrity of the investigation. Next, Whitney Webb discusses her investigative work on the overlap between Jeffrey Epstein's network and the world of cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. Last year, Mark Goodwin and I wrote a massive series on the overlap of the Epstein network and crypto Bitcoin, with a major focus on figures like Brock Pierce, Bill Elkus, Charles Cascarilla, Wences Casares, the Thielverse, and the ostensible co-authors of the recently passed Genius Act. Even before the recently released Epstein emails, which prove without a doubt Epstein's involvement in this industry, it was clear that his network of financial criminals and intelligence assets had embedded themselves very early on in the crypto industry, specifically Bitcoin. Why would a career financial criminal like Epstein be so invested in Bitcoin and digital currency at large? Our series, link in next tweet, provides several clues, but we will be fleshing this out even more in a new book due out next year. Consider it the financial-focused successor of One Nation Under Blackmail. Whitney Webb is explaining her research into how Jeffrey Epstein and his associates were involved in the early days of cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin. She names several prominent figures and suggests that Epstein's network of financial criminals and intelligence operatives saw digital currency as a new frontier for their activities. Webb teases further revelations in an upcoming book and points viewers to her investigative series, The Chain, for more details. These posts and reposts from Whitney Webb reveal the hidden architecture of global finance, politics, and technology. For more, check out her full investigations and stay alert to how these networks shape our world.